Althia Raj is the Parliamentary Bureau Chief for Huffington Post Canada. David Akin is the Parliamentary Bureau Chief for Sun Media. And Kristy Kirkup is a Parliamentary Correspondent for the Canadian Press. Good to see you all. Thanks for being here. A couple of things to cover. We'll talk about the big policy weekend for the NDP, but let's start with, I suppose, the big story to watch, and that's what's going to happen to Tom Mulcair this weekend. Let's start there. What are you hearing about how easily he might or might not survive a leadership review, and now in this whole issue of the 70%? David, you want to start?
Well, it's hard to handicap because there is no poll of just the people who are going to be there. There are going to be 1,500 delegates, and it's only delegates who get to vote on this. So 70% is what, about 1,100, 1,200 people are going to spend $3,000 to go all the way to Edmonton to say, I'm really happy with the way things are going. Some people think, yes, I'm not going to spend all that money if I'm going to be unhappy, but I'm of the impression I spend the money when I'm angry. If I want change in the party I love and I'm near and dear about, and I'll spend the money to go and throw a leader out. So that's one little angle, but here I'll argue against myself. Mulcair across the country is actually pretty popular in British Columbia. He found a big base of support there during the leadership, and there's a lot of British Columbia delegates going to Edmonton. BC and Alberta make up the biggest form. That could work in Mulcair's favor. So put me down as a, gee, I don't know.
Yeah, well, some have suggested to me that the big bump up in the number of people going, because they started with 800, now they're up to 1,500, was when it looked like Tom Mulcair might be in trouble. The Tom Mulcair supporters made a point of making sure that they get to Edmonton. Kristy, what are you hearing?
Yeah, I definitely have heard the same thing, that there really has been this campaign that has intensified for Tom Mulcair to keep his job. I find it fascinating that Tom Mulcair, of course, is no stranger to campaigning, but this time he is the only guy in the race, and he's still having trouble trying to shore up support to actually keep his job. When I was over at the Progress Summit last week in Ottawa, I had some really interesting conversations on the sidelines of that summit, and people are still really angry. And you just get this impression that there are people who they understand that Tom Mulcair was effective in the House, for example, but the real question, I think, is whether or not he was an effective salesperson during the course of the campaign. I think there's a lot of people who think he actually was a terrible salesperson. He wasn't able to effectively communicate the message. And moving forward, the question is he the best front man for our movement? And I think that there, even for people who are around him that are engaged in that kind of campaign to keep him, I think there are lingering questions about whether or not they even like the guy. So that's a bit troubling.
Althia, does he survive the vote?
I think he survives the vote, but I think that Kristy touched on to something that is also happening at this convention, is the idea of what does the NDP party stand for? And you keep hearing that with the LEAP manifesto, for example, which is a very left wing. You know, it could have come from the Socialist Party, Socialist Caucus wing of the party. Do you want to be a party that is center-left, that goes after power with sort of the offering that came in the last election? Or do you want a sort of a policy proposals that are put forward to the electorate, kind of like Jeremy Corbyn might do, like Bernie Sanders is doing south of the border? And if you want to be more like a Bernie Sanders, then is Tom Mulcair really the guy?
That's a key question, isn't it?
To sell that. And I think that is what people are wrestling with. And this idea that some union leaders are suggesting, like Jeremy Dias, that you could just, well, vote him out in 2018, I think is not really realistic. It seems like that's just a way of saying to Tom Mulcair, we're allowing you to exit, perhaps on nicer terms, and giving you a back of the hand at the moment. I think that is really what this convention is about. What role does the NDP party want to play?
How should he be, David? How worried should he be about this concept of a reprieve? I mean, we'll give you 2 years. You're not gone today, but the clock's ticking.
He shouldn't be worried about a reprieve because he wins. If he wants to keep his job, that's what he's all about. But if I was a New Democrat, I would want Bernie Sanders leading my party. I would want Elizabeth Warren, even better, leading my party, to use another American example. I want a rabble-rouser. I want someone who's going to be a loud, thorny conscience in Justin Trudeau's hide. Not someone who can be kind of like Justin Trudeau, but a little bit sweeter here.
But that's back to the thing that New Democrats always confront. Do we want the kind of leader and the kind of policies that will attract the middle and get us to power, or do we keep on being the fighters in the conscience?
That's actually not going to get you to power, is what I'm saying. That kind of leader in our current environment is not going to get you to power, particularly if we have a ranked or changed voting system. We want somebody who's really milquetoast in a new voting system. So I'm looking for New Democrats. You've been great and got lots done without getting too much credit for it as New Democrats. Who thought of Medicare? New Democrats and the leader, Liberals copied them. And that came out of a rabble-rouser, a guy who caught people's imagination. Another party did the hard work on it. Okay, fine. You want to get stuff done or you want to be in power. Jack Layton was often all about getting stuff done. And yeah, I know they want to be in power, but they got stuff done.
So the question then becomes, Tom Mulcair survives the weekend. He gets 2 more years at least. What does he do with it, Kristy?
Well, I think that the party really would like to see, in terms of proportional representation, that is actually one of the reasons why I've heard some people say Tom Mulcair needs to stay. That over the next number of months, that there are going to be discussions around what the Liberals are going to do, if they're going to follow through on their promise, and keeping Tom Mulcair in place for that period in order to make sure that that's done. That could be one of the reasons, again, to have him at the helm of the party as someone who's a bit of a procedural nerd, that he would be good in that capacity. It's funny that you should mention, though, about
Elizabeth Warren or the procedural nerd. Well, I'll take the procedural nerd. All right.
But just on the Bernie Sanders element, I think it's interesting that you should mention him, because when I did an interview in January, when the party was having its retreat, I asked Tom Mulcair about the question of his age, which is a delicate one, of course, but he is going to be, if he stays on into the 2019 election, he'll be 65 going into that election, or just a few days shy, actually, of his 65th birthday. And he said to me, well, Kristy, are you suggesting that my friend Bernie Sanders is too old to run for the White House? And there was this moment where I kind of wanted to say, but Tom, everyone says that you're not Bernie Sanders. That's part of the problem, that, again, you're not really to be, again, that effective messenger for your movement.
Bernie Sanders has managed to effectively, or fairly effectively, negate the age question by proposing ideas that appeal to young voters, even if he's not young.
Someone who's on the cover of Vogue, you know what I mean?
He speaks to something that I think Mr. Mulcair has a lot of trouble with, which is authenticity. Nobody can doubt Bernie Sanders' social democrat credentials.
Right.
This is a guy who stood up against the war in Iraq, who at every point in turn, you look at his record, he is always to the left of everybody. And there's a lot of questions about Mr. Mulcair, about not just his past positions that came out in the election campaign, like his comments about Margaret Thatcher and the role of state enterprises, but is he really one of us? I think it's still a question that some New Democrats who didn't vote for him in 2012 are wrestling with, and they do not see him as an authentic New Democrat, and that is something that I think they're still wrestling with.
Well, that's why they need to consider, don't they have to consider those two questions, is what do we want to be heading into the next election, and who's the person to... Well,
and that's the other angle of it is, if not Mulcair, who? We've just mentioned, we know Sanders and Warren, but in the Canadian context, they're not running. And really, does Nikki Ashton do it? Well, maybe. I mean, she's a very talented politician. Nathan Cullen said no, he's not interested. Peter Julian not interested. I guess
Megan Leslie. There are a lot of people who would come out of the woodwork if he steps aside.
Yeah, and Megan Leslie, I think, would make a very credible potential leader. Problem is, she just lost into a Liberal onslaught. And do you care about that? New Democrats sometimes will discount that, but who? Yeah.
Okay, so we should point out as well just a couple of other interesting resolutions. They may or may not make it to the floor. One is that they abandoned, it comes from Peter Stoffer's riding in Nova Scotia, that the NDP should abandon its longstanding position of abolishing the Senate, saying it's not working, can't be done without constitutional change, so we need to get together as a party and figure out a new position on the Senate. The other one to watch for, it guaranteed it will not make it to the floor, should the Turks and Caicos become Canada's 11th province. All in favor? Good, done here, move on.
And we'll have our next convention in Turks and Caicos, okay. Yes, right.
So let's finish on this scenario. Tom Mulcair survives the vote with whatever the number is, and comes out of that convention. But what's the state of the party, you think, with Tom Mulcair there at a 70% vote, if that's what he gets?
I think there are remaining questions, even if he does stay on. I think the thing to be concerned about, or I think the thing that some New Democrats will be concerned about, is that whether these questions around Tom Mulcair will hang over the party, which, the questions around leadership really have dogged the party for a number of months now. It's not like anyone is really talking about what they're doing in the House. And again, he's going to face another review in 2018. So even if he makes it through this time, he should be very concerned also about 2018. So I think that it's going to be a long battle for him, and he's really going to have to continue to make his case.
If he wins, I think we can say organized labor will have played a key role in helping him win or hold on to his job. And does that mean the NDP, which has both provincial, when I say provincially, I'm talking BC, Ontario, Saskatchewan, and federally, tried to sort of separate itself from organized labor and be more the party of people's kitchen tables? Well, if Mulcair wins, are we back to maybe your dad's NDP? And I don't think that would be a move forward. I'm looking to the BC provincial election next year. New leader John Horgan, who's Mulcair-like in some respects, I think, and is approaching that election along the lines, I got to win resource workers in the northwest of that province, northeast, I guess, BC. Right. He's got to do that. Look to see how Horgan does against Kristy Kirkup, and he could set the template for a path to victory for the federal NDP. But it's definitely going to change, and I don't know if it's changing. It's going to continue to evolve with new voters and new supporters if Mulcair holds it.
Althia, so Tom Mulcair wins. How does the NDP get back in the game over the next couple of years?
You know, I think that's the question. I'm not sure. I think the party is going to be looking internally. All these discussions that we're having here, I don't think are going to be resolved in the next 3 days of convention. And so a lot of the other thing that we didn't really talk about is just how the membership felt. There's been a lot of people are saying that the party and Mr. Mulcair and the people around him need to pay more attention to the membership. And I think that's what, if he stays on, the next 2 years are going to be him focused internally more than externally.
And he's been trying to do that in a big way with going out and talking to grassroots supporters, and that's really been a part of the campaign that he's launched over the last number of months, sitting down in small rooms with people, getting in touch with the base, and doing, you know, that outreach in a really big way, again, in hopes of signaling that he actually is in touch with the members of the party.
Right. Thank you all for your perspective.